All right, hello everybody. Okay, we are just getting ready for to introduce our next speaker. I just wanted to let you know there are some milkshakes in the back of the room, and there literally are milkshakes in the back of the room, and we would like you to go and grab one and brandish it menacingly. Okay, while our next speaker is spewing Nazi propaganda and all that crap. All right. You guys need to... Yeah, he's not going to be throwing one of those today. He's going to be receiving them. Okay, let's hurry it up. Let's just grab your weapon and sit the fuck down. Jesus, people. Okay, the longer you take, the less time you're going to be able to listen to our wonderful keynote speaker. I mean, evil keynote speaker. Just want to remind you all, the flavor doesn't matter when you're going to be throwing them. I'm just kidding. You're not going to be throwing them.
Okay.
That would be very bad and wrong, and I would... Anybody does that, I will beat them to death with this microphone. Oh, everybody will be seeing it. Okay, so our third and final keynote for this conference is... Again, a man who was repeatedly suspended and eventually banned from Twitter for posting images of gay interracial porn to white nationalists. Do not correct me. I am she who must be obeyed. He was booted off Patreon for insulting white nationalists. He is known as Sargoy of Kakad by white nationalists the world over. He is a suspected white nationalist, according to one of the men's rights movement's best friends, who goes on Twitter by the name Takedown MRAs, who has taken a particular interest today in our little conference. So I'm just going to give you all I'm going to ask you all to give a warm, wonderful, not soggy, milkshakey welcome to our keynote, Carl Benjamin. Who happens to be lactose intolerant.
Oh, what a wonderful introduction! Thank you. It was actually Karen Strawn who pulled me out of the Matrix back in 2012. At the time, I was in a difficult relationship, and one I found emotionally confusing, and I felt worthless and trapped. I ended the relationship shortly after this period, but it still dominated my thoughts, as I didn't understand the demands being made of me. Now, I don't need to think this is the fault of the lady I was dating, because it likely wasn't. It was likely my own fault, through my own lack of self-understanding. But that didn't change the fact that I felt like I was trapped. And in addition to this, my government-run workplace had begun introducing female-only affirmative action programs to which I had objected. I had good arguments. I had liberal arguments. I argued for the treatment of men and women as the end goal, the equal treatment of men and women as the end goal of a fair and egalitarian society. My female boss seemed irritated by my objections. Why wouldn't I, a man in a lowly place in the organization, want to advance women in the workplace? Didn't I care about equality? Well, yes, as a matter of fact, I did. That was the bedrock of my objections. At the time, I didn't know that this was a feminist program, driven by feminist ideology, and that my status as a man prevented my voice from being relevant to the discussion. I doubt she did either. She had her marching orders, and she had to follow them. Why would she question this? She was a woman in a middle management job. She was advancing a program to promote women. This could only be a good thing. But that wasn't the only place that feminism was affecting my life. Even then, I'd been seeing feminism promoted in biased op-eds for what I had previously considered to be reputable news publications, pushed into social spaces for hobbies such as video games, and a general atmosphere of aggressively pro-woman, anti-man, an attitude manifesting in the online social space. This was particularly noticeable in that there were considered to be male spaces, in such as video games, where it was considered that by the feminist activists that men were deliberately keeping women out, even though these spaces were formed by free association, and there was simply no way that the men could keep the women out, even if they'd wanted to, which they didn't. Again, at the time, I had no idea that all of this was deliberate. I had no idea that this was all part of someone else's grand plan. Worse still is what happened to you if you spoke out against the illiberal politicization of otherwise apolitical spaces. Anyone who dared challenge the still developing cultural understanding of feminism was immediately reviled as a misogynist, a woman hater. I can still recall the first time that my counter-arguments against feminism got me dismissed as a misogynist. I was absolutely outraged. All seems rather quaint in hindsight when I look back on it now. I don't even get called a misogynist anymore. They don't even bother anymore. So in fact, it would be quite nice if they did again, because I do enjoy a laugh. But it was in this environment that I found a video on YouTube called Feminism and the Disposable Male, on a YouTube channel called Girl Writes What. Yeah. This video was particularly moving for me. Never before had I heard a woman sympathetically examine what it was to be a man in Western society. Never before had I heard a woman ask why we do not value men for what they are rather than for what they do. It was the first time that I had heard a woman recognize that women have an inherently high social status. It was the first time I had ever heard about a woman talk about the value of the self-sacrifice that men had made throughout history. I'd never before heard the case made by a woman that masculinity is a force for good. That video changed my life. And not long after, I started making videos of my own. And I suppose that the rest is history. It is entirely to the credit of the men's rights movement that it never developed an ism. It never became meninism or manism or anything like that. The men's rights movement is not, as far as I can tell, a revolutionary movement. Instead, it seeks to fulfill the promises that have already been made and claim that which is being denied to mainly lower-class men, which is fair and equal treatment. It agrees with the premise that men and women should be treated as equals, with no distinction because of their gender. It seems to seek redress for the inequalities caused by an illiberal female supremacist movement, one that seeks to blame all ills on men and falsely claim all victimhood to women. It seems that the men's rights movement has a just cause. The facts are, as you will all know without having me reiterate them to you, in favor of those things that you are demanding. What I am saying here is that the things that you are doing, the changes for which you are asking, are fundamentally just. 2 or 3 years ago, I had a conversation with Mike on a live stream, otherwise known as Dr. Randa McCann. I'm sure you all know him very well. The discussion was centered around the label of MRA, Men's Rights Activist, whether it was a useful label to hold or not. After all, long before the current public awareness of the present-day wave of feminism had existed, the men's rights movement had already been relentlessly demonized. Before the public had known anything about you, the term MRA was a derogatory slur, a dismissive label used to categorize and dismiss your concerns, a way of deplatforming you and rendering you hateful to an ignorant public. I had suggested a tactical rebranding. The term was toxic. The feminists had taken it and defined it to mean evil, contrasting it against themselves, which they had defined to mean good. Mike would not relent. No, this was his label, their label, your label. He was not prepared to give it up to his enemies. It wasn't like the feminists were going to stop beating with the label anyway, so there was no real point. I mean, I've never adopted it, and I get beaten with it as well. He was right, of course, and I was wrong. He showed strength where I'd recommended weakness. He, like the other MRAs, did not define themselves by the words of their enemies. He would keep it, he would own it, he would wear it fearlessly and with pride. He was doing the right thing, and they were not. It was not justified for him to change. So, my message to the men's rights movement is simple. Keep going. You are needed now more than ever. You have weathered the slings and arrows and shown that through perseverance you can create a space to discuss those important topics without radical feminist bigots being able to shut you down. Don't stop now. I am not laying claim to have been part of your movement, but I am a friend and a fellow traveller and a well-wisher of it. I have never cast out men's rights activists from my own social circles because I've never seen any reason to do so. The men's rights movement has never asked for anything unreasonable. It's never asked for anything that's undeserved. And it's never asked for anything that is not fair. You are doing the right thing. You are doing an unpopular thing, and you are doing a necessary thing. Which is why I was delighted to be invited to speak at what I have been informed is the largest conference on men's issues so far. On my tour of the Southwest, I met a man in Gloucester, and he told me with tears in his eyes that he was feeling at the end of his tether, because by court injunction, he was only allowed to see his children once every 2 weeks. It broke my heart. I am a father, and I'm fortunate enough to see my son every day of my life, except for when I'm traveling. And it's the best part of my day, and a part of me would die a painful death were I not able to do so. I saw the pain in his eyes, and I grasped his hand and shook it firmly. And I told him to hang on. I understood that he was going through an existential pain, and all he could do was play the game with a deck that was stacked against him. He had no other options, and he had no particular reason to hope. I told him that there are people working hard every day to help, and that they're doing their best. But it was going to be a long road until he achieved justice. But he mustn't stop. Because if he stops, then what follows? If you stop, what follows? An unjust future, where the powerful masquerade as the powerless, and the powerless must cruelly suffer in silence. I know that it will be a long and difficult road ahead, as it has been up until this point. But if your mission is to be a success, you can't stop now. It's a strange occurrence of history that a supremacist movement might take control of societies that would otherwise be sympathetic to the suffering of the voiceless. But here we are. As Bill Maher said many years ago in one of his old comedy skits, there are many men leading lives of quiet desperation. That is, those who do not simply choose to put an end to their suffering. It may come a time that any one of us could be in that position. So I say again, you have to keep going. Those men need you. Thank you.
Oh, okay. It's just Pepsi. I thought it was stout, and I was going to give him a hard time. Only one of us is allowed to drink alcohol at this podium, so. I am going to thank you so much for that. I really enjoyed that. I'm going to ask you all to line up at the microphone. Leave your milkshakes at your tables just in case you get tempted. And do you want a milkshake now? Just in case you need it in self-defense? You're okay? All right, so line up, and we have a nice long question period, which is actually kind of nice because I've always had to cut off questioners and say, you know, turn away 5 people, so we can actually have a nice long question period. So have at it.
Okay. Hi, Carl Gon. I'm unarmed. So this is a question I've always wanted to ask you.
I'm not afraid of milkshakes.
Yeah, good for your skin. So I guess with the fall of religion, there was like a morality vacuum that was taken up by intersectional feminism. And I found it strange that despite being atheists, there are men like you and, I dare say me, who are very principled. And I was wondering, how do you think you came to be that way? And do you feel there is a way to institutionalize that to, kind of spread that throughout society in a more balanced way?
No, I don't think it can be institutionalized because I became the man I am because of my father. It wasn't because of a government institution, and I don't think that kind of moral fortitude can be inculcated through the intervention of government. And I think it's really only destroyed because of government, because of the subsidization of the destruction of the family. I think as a cultural imperative, we should be trying to get families to stay together. We should be trying to get men and women to live together and love each other and raise healthy, happy, well-adjusted children. I think that the government's meddling in this regard has been the downfall of our society, and I think that the longer we carry on pretending that the opposite is true, then the worse things are going to get.
So I seem to be unable to find the cement-flavored milkshakes. Is this like a bring-your-own-cement event?
I believe they're only available in Portland.
Thank you.
That's it.
I don't think I could top that question. All right, so I know that your videos mostly have been focused on culture in general, whether you're talking about intersectional feminism and racism and all of these other things, and you know, it just sort of like leans itself into like global politics and all these like larger ideas. And men's rights activism tends to be a lot more focused.
Yeah.
However, I'm wondering, I have a theory that all of those other issues that deal with race and deal with culture and deal with even religion and nationality and left and right, etc., all of those are actually just the issues that come out of all that, from school shooters to suicide and the abortion argument. All of it just comes down to the growing crevasse between men and women. And I was wondering if I'm oversimplifying things, or if I'm looking at the Meninist lens, or if there is something to that in your mind.
I think that a great deal of society's ills is due to the breakdown of the family. And you can see this in various demographics. I mean, obviously in the United States, it's the black community that we're talking about when we say that.
And us Latinos,
but
we're
yeah.
right behind them.
Yeah, but it is a lot more advanced in the black community, and I mean, it's just a tragedy. It's just awful to see. I think there's a lot of understanding that young men need their fathers, but I think young girls need their fathers too. And I think it's deeply irresponsible for us to continue supporting any kind of initiatives that would separate families apart in unnecessary ways.
Is that good?
No, I mean, these are new cultural phenomena. These are not things that actually were happening in the past, and we know this. So it's one of those things where we have to be realistic and say, well, look, the intersectional left, the sort of the radical socialist Marxist types, they don't have an accurate assessment of human nature and what people need to become fully actualized adults. And until we recognize that and just start rolling back the changes to the culture and society at large, as well as the laws that they've made, then we're going to see the problems keep getting worse.
Yep, I agree absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is a bit of a dark question, but do you think that there will ever come a time where the men's rights movement will become corrupt like a lot of modern feminism is? And if so, do you have any warnings or advice to prevent that?
I mean, anything can become corrupt. So it's always down to our own personal vigilance to make sure that something doesn't become corrupt. So I'm not going to say that there's no danger of it. Obviously there is. And if tomorrow the men's rights movement were to become incredibly well funded by various NGOs or international billionaires or whatever, then doubtless corruption would creep in. Not that that's likely to happen, obviously. But doubtless corruption would creep in. But I think it's not something that I would be inherently concerned about, because you are not promoting an ism. And I mentioned this in the speech because I think this is deeply important. Because I think that when people are doing something for the greater good, when they're fighting for an ism, when they're fighting for a status quo that they seek to see realized, rather than just addressing individual issues that are falling by the wayside from what is currently the establishment, the status quo, they give themselves moral license to do certain things, because ultimately what they're doing is much better. What they're trying to achieve ameliorates any of the bad individual decisions that they make along the way. Philosophically, I don't see the men's rights movement falling into that trap because they're not an ism. So I'm not worried about that, because I honestly don't think you'll get the funding that you need from a giant organization to become corrupt in a very swift way. And I don't think that you're in the same position as the feminists. So I'm not worried about that too much. But like I said, there is always a chance. So the only thing we can do is ever be vigilant.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Senpai. Notice me. I had a question, and I'm wondering why do you believe that the opposition hate us like that? Not just like as men's rights advocate or as a specific group, but like as men, as people, as whites or as Westerners. Why do these groups of people that we've seen, not even the Antifa, just the people calling you a right-wing Nazis and saying that you shouldn't even be allowed to present yourself to the election, why do they hate us?
Because they define you as the oppressors. I can't speak to why the individuals join the movement, feminism, intersectionality, why they adopt it. I'm sure that each individual one has their own particular dysfunction that leads them into desiring having an enemy that they can fight. But as a movement, it's because they simply define everything along the lines of group power. So if men are mostly CEOs or politicians, then the man who's taking out your rubbish or cleaning the streets or, you know, in the sewers, he is as culpable for any oppression that's perceived to come from the top as anywhere else. So he is just lumped in, and so now all men are the enemy. And all women, of course, must naturally be the victims, even if they're powerful. I mean, I had a conversation with Sahira Rao before she got sort of Twitter famous for being a massive bigot and the most hateful person you can imagine. She's like the avatar of wokeness now. And she took me through her rationale for why this was the case. And I simply pointed out, well, my country's run by women. You know, in the Welsh Assembly we have female, it's the female leader. Scotland has Nicola Sturgeon. Britain at the time had Theresa May. So I just asked her, well, am I being oppressed? And she just sort of flickered her eyes back into her head and then ejected from the conversation. And I was like, well, I guess that's a yes then. I didn't know what else to say. It's like, well, there we go. So yeah, they don't like men as an abstract idea based on this, but they'll hate you in particular because for them it is all or nothing. There's no compromise. They've got the truth on their side, therefore you must have lie on your side. You have the falsehoods. And if you willingly adopt that position, then you must be evil. You must be a bad person. You're a racist, you're a sexist, blah, 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 blah. And it's okay to hate you. You know, it's okay to hate that kind of person. Even though, I mean, I personally would say don't hate anyone. Like, I don't hate Nazis or communists. I don't hate anyone. I don't hate criminals. I don't hate people who have done terrible things. I think that what they have done is terrible, but I'm not going to let myself be consumed with hate, because it's a remarkably negative emotion that drags your life down, makes your experience in the world worse. I think it's deeply unhealthy, and I feel bad for these people who are trapped in this sort of cult-like mentality where they, I mean, imagine, like, a recent thing in Britain where Trump was coming over, and there was a guy there with a Trump hat, and there was just some fat woman who works for the NHS screaming Nazi, Nazi at the guy, and the rage in her face. And I'm just thinking, I never want to be like that. Like, I don't want to be that upset about anything. That's what this does. It drags you down into this hell. And she, I mean, looking back at it, she had to apologize and say, well, look, I wasn't proud of myself. And it's like, of course you weren't proud of yourself, but you didn't think about why you were doing it, did you? You know, it felt good at the time, so you got swept up into it, and then suddenly you're going viral for being a psycho. So, you know, just be measured. That's all I can say on that. But thank you.
Well, thank you.
First, two short statements. If you don't want to end up like this person, cut down on the carbs. Secondly,
True statement.
secondly, about being oppressed by female leaders, I really do like Angela Merkel, and I think I know it's very controversial,
not judging.
and she made bad decisions, but as a person and as a leader, I actually really like her, because I think she is a politician, not a female politician. On the other hand, Nicola Sturgeon is a full-blown feminist, and I, as a new Scotsman, feel very oppressed by her. So that's just as a statement. Sticking with politics, you're not just a political commentator, you're also politically active. We need to change society for men's rights, but we also need to change policies. if the party that we both support, if we, for example, would approach them and say, can we address certain human issues? I don't want to call them man's issues because it's about equality. Should we address them? Is there a danger that if we address them, that the other parties gonna say, we can't touch them at all just because we are outcasts?
Well, the party he's talking about is UKIP.
UKIP.
So, I mean,
Yay!
they've
Go UKIP. For now.
they've always had that status, so I don't think it's anything they need to worry about. But yeah, the change has to come from within the culture itself first. As with any legal change that comes, it never just comes from the top down, it comes from the bottom up. So I think that the only thing we can do is change the culture and then get politically active. And I don't see that UKIP would have any objection to anything that the men's rights movement is asking for. Just like Philip Davies with the Conservatives. There's just nothing in their philosophy that means that they would say, well, that's not something we're going to agree with, because an injustice is an injustice. To them, it doesn't matter who it's being done to, you know? So, yeah, I don't think that actually answered your question.
No, you have to a certain extent. In Germany, the AfD, which is far more populist than UKIP, I would say, one of their representatives addressed men's issues, and for doing so, the whole party was now stigmatized as misogynistic and women-hating. And that's why I'm asking the question.
Yeah.
As soon as UKIP would address certain issues that are male-centric, the same thing could happen.
Well, UKIP's publicly opposed feminism, so they're already a party full of misogynists. So yeah, I mean, it's just going to be one of those slings and arrows that we're going to have to take. You know, obviously, everyone knows that the feminists are going to call you all just a shotgun barrel full of names, so you may as well just get used to it.
Hi. So my impression of you, I watch your videos, is that you would maybe consider yourself a centrist. You're very, love equality and all that, and maybe you feel like you have to kind of lean into the political wind sometimes. What do you do personally to keep yourself centered and grounded so that in leaning in you don't become radicalized yourself?
Yeah, this is a question that I get asked a lot, actually, and I've got basically one stock answer, because it's the only thing I can think of to do. I have to watch media, and I suggest that all of you watch media from the people you disagree with. Not only does it mean that they are most accurately representing their own arguments, they're steel manning themselves, because they're the ones making their arguments, but it also means that you don't only hear one set of facts, because the polarization of society along partisan lines at the moment is due to the fact that, and they know this, this is well documented, that your social media feed, you tend to only like things that interest you, and they don't even interest you that much initially. Initially, you'll like, you'll see something shared from a page and think, oh, that was interesting. I didn't know that, whatever percentage of women get 30% less than men or something, the gender pay gap or whatever. You go, oh, that's interesting. You're not a radical feminist. You just think, oh, that's something that I can treat as credible, and so you like that page, and so now you start seeing more of the same information, but you haven't gone and found the counterpoint to that information, and so you sit there and you gain more and more and more. And this is with anything. It's not just with politics. It's just that in cultural matters, like I follow a lot of like Jurassic Park fan pages and stuff like this, and they're rabid. They're absolutely rabid for the fandom itself. But obviously it doesn't matter, because who cares? It's just the dinosaur movies. But I watch it with kind of a bit of distance now, because like, oh God, they're so weird about this subject now. But it's the same with politics. And the problem with politics is you've got the opponent that you're arguing against. But yeah, so you have to follow content and listen to media from a whole range of political spectrums, and then that's how I managed to keep myself somewhere in the center without going off the reservation. And I can't think of a better way of doing it. But it takes personal discipline, because I tell you what, a lot of the time, I am so sick of watching the Young Turks. I am so sick of it. And every single one of their things I watch, because they don't do this, every single video of theirs I watch, they just sound like they're in another universe. It's like, right, okay, reporting from crazy leftist land, But yeah, so that's the only advice I have on that, I'm afraid.
Hello.
Hi.
I've been following the get woke, go broke phenomenon for a little while now. And I've noticed companies like Marvel and Battlefield Battlefield, they've suffered a lot of losses because of their decisions.
Yeah.
But Nike and the Black Panther, which a lot of people would consider to be a quote-unquote woke film, have actually been financial successes. Do you think there is a distinguishing factor between those examples?
Yeah, I think the important thing, and Black Panther in particular, was quite an interesting example because it wasn't something that was being co-opted. Black Panther, that was the point of the story. It was a secret black society that had developed high technology and whatnot. So nothing was being co-opted. There was no one to upset there. And so people who weren't into that sort of thing but had then been presented in an advert or something like that, this is a new to them, a new franchise. That it was a cohesive world. It was consistent within its own logic, and so there was nothing untoward about it. So there was no reason you couldn't go and enjoy it. I mean, I watched it. I enjoyed it as it was. I mean, it wasn't really my favorite film, but without knowing anything about the politics of it, it didn't come across as false or forced or anything like that, unlike other brands of superheroes that are being co-opted for racial and gender politics. So yeah, that's what honestly I would rather see them do. I would rather see them take an existing property and make something good of it, because they act as if there are no female superheroes or black superheroes, and it's just nonsense. They just look jealously at other successful ones and say, right, we're going to have to take that. And I always hate that, because it's so condescending. It's so condescending. It's like, oh, you can't have something of your own. You've got to go after what the white people have or something. It's like, why? And that was I think the real success of Black Panther was the fact that it showed you don't have to do that. You can take something that was made and crafted in a particular universe with a particular logic and make a success of it. So it was in hindsight that I thought, actually, this is a really good thing about Black Panther. And it's a really interesting distinction that you brought that up.
Thank you.
So I once got into an argument with a interactivist feminist on Facebook because she proceeded to tell me that all MRAs are hateful, misogynistic bigots. And I had to tell her, you're an MRA, you're fighting for the rights of infants to have their entire, infant males to have their entire bodies. So my question is, you have sort of, based on your conversation with Dr. Rendercam, MRAs and interactivism, they're kind of in separate spheres. The only issue that we have that's almost completely autonomous. So my question is, based on your conversation about adopting the MRA of doubling down on that acronym, should we also double down into activism, allow take ownership of it completely, or should we allow it to have its semi-autonomy and kind of cede a little bit of that ground to the feminists, hoping that they might have success in their own way?
I don't actually know about much about the interactivism stuff, because I haven't followed it. But I personally would recommend that if you feel that you are doing something positive, and if you think that you are comporting yourself in a respectable way, then it really doesn't matter what they say. I watched the Red Pill documentary the other day. The first time I'd seen it, it was really good. And it was really nice to see some of the old footage from like 2012 in Toronto or Calgary or wherever it was. I hadn't seen it in years, and I was just looking at it as an outsider now for the first time. And there's this horde of screeching feminists screaming and chanting, "This is what men's rights look like," and they look awful. And the MRAs are just standing there quietly, just like, I'm just here to listen to the other side. I'm not even on a side. I just want to hear what they have to say. And I'm thinking, well, okay, if you're just a stranger to all of this and you see both of these sides, who are you going to be interested in talking to? Yep. And I think that's how you win in that regard. I think that trying to take ownership of things, don't worry about any of that. What you are will be demonstrated by the way that you act. The virtue will be demonstrable. Just carry on doing what you're doing in that regard. Be sensible, be normal.
Thank you very much.
Hi.
Hi.
So one of the things that really strikes me about feminism is it seems so dedicated to kind of changing men or taking from men everything that would be attractive to a woman.
Yes.
You know, I mean, if you know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah, because women who are attractive and can attract men don't need feminism.
Yeah, right. But I mean, like, you know, they want to mold
Prove
men.
me wrong.
They want to mold men into exactly that which they find
Most
zero attractive.
Yeah, yeah.
They want to take away, you know, what's your take on that?
It's because these women can't get men.
Well, but it's like they want to make all men unattractive.
Yeah, because there are some women who are having sex with attractive men and they're not. You can imagine how angry that makes these man haters. So, yeah, no, it's not just that. They've got all kinds of rationalizations as for why these things are bad. And Karen's example with the Gillette advert earlier was excellent, pointing out that roughhousing's good for young men and it turns them into men, respectable men.
Right, and feminists want to put a stop to it.
Exactly.
Anything that men do or are that might be attractive or desirable, they want it gone.
Which is why at the Portland protests yesterday, there was a picture that went viral was of an Antifa soy boy who's wearing a T-shirt that just says "Beta Cuck for Life." This guy's being arrested by the cops. I'm like, dude, this was not where you wanted your life to go, is it? This is not what you were looking for when you were growing up and thinking, it's this awful self-abasement and debasement that is, like you say, it's deeply unattractive, and it's a way of keeping them in line, isn't it? It's a way of making sure that there's a ready supply of minions to go out and chant. And by the way, I've said this before and I'll say this again. Never debate with a beta male leftist. Never debate with a male feminist. Always go for the women and talk to the females who are the ones commanding these little armies of minions. Because they're not worth anything, and they know it. They know that they're not worth anything, so don't give them their time. Until they can figure out that they should have some self-respect, and they do have some value of their own, don't bother with them. They're not the ones you need to actually talk to. But thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, Alistair. And I know you're going to think I planned this, but it actually is. We are out of time. So I'm so sorry. Yeah. No, it's you annoyed me one too many times on this conference. So it does. It means war. Everybody give a round of applause to and thank you very much for coming. I appreciate it. Thank you for talking me up and shit. I always love that.
Can't you see it too? There's an elephant in the room.